All right, pleasant good morning to all viewing. We'd like to acknowledge Mrs. Nerissa Gittins Macmillan, Permanent Secretary in the Ministry of Agriculture, Forestry, Fisheries, Rural Transformation, Industry and Labor, Dr. Renata Clark, Sub-Regional Coordinator of the Sub-Regional Office of the Caribbean Food and Agricultural Organization of the United Nations, the FAO, Ms. Monique Johnson, Project Manager at the University of the West Indies Seismic Research Center, St. Augustine, Trinidad and Tobago, Mrs. Deidre Clarendon, Division Chief, Social Sector Division, Caribbean Development Bank. Mr. Ricardo Aiken, Community Development Specialist at the CDB, and Mr. Roberto Sandoval of the FAO, Pastor Wade Carter of the Evangelical Church of Kittels. And I would also like to recognize the presence of Ms. Elizabeth Riley, the Executive Director of SEDEMA, Ms. Michelle Forbes of NEMO, Professor Richard Robertson of the UWI Seismic Research Center, Dr. Dwayne Vernon, the Executive Director, Social Development Commission of in Jamaica. Persons who are viewing from the 11 communities, the hubs as well, and various persons who are viewing this program this morning. My name is Khalil Kato. A pleasant good morning to you. I'll be your chair for this proceeding, as we will be providing a launch of the community profiles and livelihood baseline assessments. This is a process that was taken on by the Ministry of National Mobilization, Social Development, Family Gender Affairs, Youth, Housing and Informal Settlements, along with the Ministry of Agriculture, Forestry, Fisheries, Rural Transformation, Industry and Labor. And this was done in collaboration with the Community Disaster Risk Reduction Fund, the UWI Seismic Research Center, and the Food and Agricultural Organization of the United States. A pleasant good morning to all those of you who are viewing, and a pleasant good morning to those who are present here in-house. At this point, we'd like to invite Pastor Wade Carter to the podium to open our proceedings with a word of prayer.
Pleasant morning to all present and to all viewing. Our God is a great God and His word of great praises. So let me invite us all to stand together at this time as we acknowledge His presence and express our dependence upon Him. Our great and eternal God, we bow before your presence as we acknowledge you this morning. We give you thanks for the fact that you have revealed yourself to us and you have given us the privilege to get to know you. And we understand that while you are the awesome God, the all-sufficient God, the one who really doesn't need anyone or anything else, Lord, you have made us, and you've made us to depend upon you. And so we realize that in all issues and matters of life, that we do need to look to you and to trust you. So we thank you as we come at this time for, Lord, this awareness, this consciousness of our dependence upon you. And we want to give you thanks for this project that has been completed. And Lord, you are aware of the purpose for it. You're aware of what is desired as the outcome. And we commit that to you and pray that you'd help us to be successful, not only from our own human perspective, but even from your perspective. And we want to thank you for this time. We pray that you'd help us to experience your presence. We pray that you'll guide and bless the proceedings. And we want to continue to ask that even as we seek, as we go forward as a people to seek to develop our nation, you remind us of our continued dependence upon you, and not only that, but also of the fact that each of us would have to someday stand before you to give an account of our lives. And so we trust that that would guide us even as we seek to develop ourselves as a people. And we trust you for these mercies and blessings in Jesus' name. Amen.
Thank you very much, Pastor Carter. At this moment, we want to invite those of you who are viewing from wherever you are to, stand as we reverence our nation at this point, as we all do a lusty rendition of the national anthem of St. Vincent and the Grenadines. St. Vincent, land so beautiful, with joyful hearts we pledge to thee our loyalty and love, and vow to keep you ever free. Whatever see us through. May peace reign from shore to shore, and God bless and keep us through. High road of fair and blessed heights, the mountains high so clear and green are home to me, though I may stray, a haven come serene. Whate'er the future brings, our faith will see us through. May peace reign from shore to shore, and God bless and keep us through. Our little sister islands are those gems, the lovely grenadines, upon their seas and golden sands the sunshine ever beams. Whate'er the future brings, our faith will see us through. May peace reign from shore to shore, and God bless and keep us through. All right. Thank you very much. I think we might be able to form a choir when we're finished with our proceedings here this morning. At this point, I'd like to invite the Permanent Secretary in the Ministry of Agriculture, Fisheries, Forestry, Rural Transformation and Industry and Labor, to come to the podium to give some opening remarks. But before Mrs. Nerissa Gittins Macmillan does that, I must make a correction to something I said a little earlier, where let me find my paper here. I made mention that Dr. Renata Clark, I think I said the United States FAO, that should be United Nations. So that's my correction to be made there. Dr. Renata Clark is from the United Nations Food and Agricultural Organization. We'd now like to invite Mrs. Nerissa Gittins Macmillan, Permanent Secretary in the Ministry of Agriculture, for some opening remarks.
Thank you very much, Chairman. Protocol already established. I wish to firstly apologize for the absence of my minister, who unfortunately cannot be with us this morning. So I'm going to be brief to say that in this room and for the viewing public, I'm probably the most blessed since I've struggled this activity through two ministries. I've been here from the start and now for the finish. So I am exceedingly excited that you here in the room and those viewing can join with me in celebrating this milestone. Thank you very much for being here.
Thank you very much, Mrs. Gittins Macmillan. At this point, we'll invite to the podium to also give some remarks Dr. Renata Clark, the coordinator of the Sub-Regional Office for the Caribbean Food and Agricultural Organization of the United Nations. Oh, sorry, that's supposed to be a video presentation. So we'll have a video presentation by Dr. Renata Clark.
You know, over the last 20 months alone, apart from grappling with the COVID crisis, St. Vincent and the Grenadines has experienced one of the longest and most severe droughts in recent years, the most active Atlantic hurricane season, an outbreak of dengue fever, and of course, the Soufriere eruption. And this is in addition to other low-key and sometimes recurrent hazards that some of our communities have been experiencing. The 2021 FAO report on the impact of disasters and crises on agriculture and food security very eloquently states that at no other point in history has agriculture been faced with such an array of familiar and unfamiliar risks, interacting in a hyper-connected world and precipitously changing landscape. The growing frequency and intensity of disasters, along with the systemic nature of risk, are jeopardizing our entire food system. So these multiple and cascading hazards are certainly not exclusive to St. Vincent and the Grenadines or even the Caribbean, but the extreme vulnerability of the Caribbean SIDS is well known. Although we may not have direct control over the occurrence, frequency, and intensity of disasters, our experience over the past years has taught us that we can take actions to manage them and reduce their impacts, especially if we have a clear and solid understanding of how these disasters can affect our communities and the livelihoods that they depend on. It's for this reason that FAO was very pleased to participate in the preparation of the community profiles and livelihood baseline assessments for 11 communities in St. Vincent and the Grenadines. Livelihood baseline assessments are important tools that allow communities and the institutions that serve them to better understand how vulnerable their livelihoods are to disasters and what they can do to reduce the impacts of disasters and recover from these in a timely way. We therefore see this as an important element of a comprehensive approach to resilience building, alongside other initiatives to which our respective institutions are contributing. The profiles are important as we plan a number of our interventions that seek to improve livelihoods of agricultural communities. Specifically, they will support the implementation of FAO's flagship hand-in-hand approach in St. Vincent and the Grenadines. This hand-in-hand approach focuses on partnership, data, including geospatial modeling and analytics, market-oriented food systems approaches that concretely improve lives and livelihoods. So the baselines that have been produced through the LBA reports will be the gauge by which we can all judge whether, in fact, we are supporting these communities to advance. Finally, I would like to take this opportunity to thank all of the partners of this exercise: the Ministry of National Mobilization, Social Development, Local Government, Gender Affairs, Family Affairs, Housing and Informal Settlement, the Ministry of Agriculture, Fisheries, Forestry, Rural Transformation, Industry and Labor, the Caribbean Development Bank, the Community Disaster Risk Reduction Fund, and the University of the West Indies Seismic Research Center. We value this partnership and we remain committed to supporting the resilience building of our communities and institutions in St. Vincent and the Grenadines. Thank you. I'm looking forward to the rest of the launch.
All right, thank you very much, Dr. Renata Clark. At this time, I'd also like to say good morning and welcome to those who are listening to us via NBC Radio. And while mention was made of the eruption of the La Soufriere volcano, we'd also again like to say good morning to persons from the 11 communities which this process had taken place in, and also the hubs where we'll have community leaders, I think at the Ministry of Agriculture's conference room, and also persons who would have had to be evacuated who are now being housed at the Caliaqua Anglican School and the Dorsetshire Hill Evangelical Church. These persons from the areas of Owea, Fancy and Sandy Bay, so we'd like to say good morning to you as well. We'll next have another virtual presentation which will be done by the Division Chief of the Social Sector Division of the Caribbean Development Bank, Mrs. Deidre Clarendon.
to everybody, particularly our communities who, as we said, are located all over the island of St. Vincent at this point in time. It is indeed a pleasure to participate in today's launch of the Community Profiles and Livelihood Baseline Assessments, which we like to term the LBAs. This is indeed a significant step for the Caribbean Development Bank in pursuit of our vision to contribute towards the economic and social development of our region. This is not solely the vision of CDB, but also that of the partners involved in this process here today, as our mandates are aligned around improved resilience, which is a key strategy for the realization of the Sustainable Development Goals. As echoed in the theme of this event, inclusive community development and building resilience, this means that for anyone and for all of us to achieve and sustain a state of resilience, communities must be engaged in the resilience building cycle. This involves problem identification, prioritization, implementation of solutions, and monitoring and evaluation geared towards improving life. In effect, communities must become the vehicles for improved resilience as they take their role as protagonists in this process. Resilience for us is more than just the latest development buzzword. The concept captures the trajectory of development thinking, which has constantly evolved and adapted to new stimuli and new research findings over the years. Some of these new areas include vulnerability to exogenous shocks, such as the impacts of climate change, as well as social inequalities that hinder the advancement of the most vulnerable populations. The Community Disaster Risk Reduction Fund was established in 2012 as a multi-donor trust fund managed by CDB, with financing from Global Affairs Canada, and later joined by the Department of International Development, now Foreign and Commonwealth Development Office of the United Kingdom, and the European Union. When it was founded, the purpose was to collaborate on projects designed to reduce the adverse disaster and climate-related impacts to various communities within our borrowing member countries. A total of 8 sub-projects were financed in Belize, British Virgin Islands, Jamaica, and St. Vincent and the Grenadines. A major constraint identified during implementation of the CDRRF was the limited availability of community-level data across participating borrowing member countries. This challenge restricts data-driven development planning at a community level and creates a significant challenge for community groups to objectively articulate their needs and secure partnerships to improve quality of life. In recognition of this information deficit, rapid community climate vulnerability assessments for the 8 sub-projects were conducted. The most recent eruption of La Soufrière volcano is an indication of how important community-level data and information are in helping communities and stakeholders better prepare for and respond to disaster events. The LBAs were prepared for 11 communities within the red zone, as targeted under the Volcano Ready Communities Project, managed by the University of the West Indies Seismic Research Center. We envision that these community profiles and LBAs will allow national, regional, and international development partners to access critical data to inform development intervention within these communities. Equally, community leaders can use the information to articulate local needs, highlight existing vulnerabilities, and develop evidence-based rationale for accessing concessionary funding. These baseline documents also provide a platform for collaboration between civil society organizations, government agencies, private sector, and other development partners to execute initiatives geared at improving the resilience of our communities and collectively in the wider national context. The process that led to the result that we are celebrating today is just as important. The involvement of community leaders and the improved competencies of community development professionals all culminated in high country level ownership of the LBAs and augurs well for the formulation of similar types of interventions in the future. We are pleased to commend and recognize the great partnership, the technical support and guidance of the Social Development Commission in Jamaica, the Food and Agriculture Organization of the United Nations, the commitment and ownership by the University of the West Indies Seismic Research Center, the Ministries of Agriculture and National Mobilization, the National Emergency Management Organization, and the Basic Needs Trust Fund program in St. Vincent and the Grenadines. CDB will certainly take note of the lessons learned from this exercise and build on it as we seek to improve our partnership with the public and private sectors, as well as civil society organizations. We are indeed delighted to be part of this process, and we look forward to continued collaboration as we envision improved resilience in all our borrowing member countries. Thank you, and I wish you a good day.
Mrs. Clarendon, Division Chief of the Social Sector Division at the Caribbean Development Bank. Next, we'll have a presentation, an overview of the Volcano Ready Community Sub-Project. This will be presented by Ms. Monique Johnson, Project Manager at the University of the West Indies Seismic Research Center, St. Augustine, Trinidad and Tobago.
Thank you very much. All protocols and salutations observed. Good morning, everyone here today, listening and viewing. It is a pleasure to be back here in St. Vincent, always, and it is an honor to be here to speak to you about the Volcano Ready project. We have been working alongside the Caribbean Development Bank in this process for the last few years, and I will just give you an overview of the Volcano Ready project, which began in 2017. The Volcano Ready project is a partnership with NEMO, the St. Vincent and the Grenadines Red Cross Society, and the Community Development Division in the Ministry of National Mobilization and Social Development. With the overall objective of reducing vulnerability to the La Soufrière volcano and its multi-hazard environment. The project aims to increase and enhance community emergency response, preparedness and awareness in the volcanic and related hazard. To achieve this mission, our efforts were focused on the 12 northernmost communities located in the red and orange volcanic hazard zone. Utilizing the Red Cross methodology for assessing vulnerability and capacity at the community level, our first effort was to zoom in on the hazard perception and establish baseline data. This was done alongside CDB's livelihood assessment, but with a focus on risk and hazard perception. We then developed a database of human and transportation resources and identified vulnerable persons in our communities who would need assistance in the event of evacuation. These were developed through focused community engagement and mapping exercises, and was executed with community volunteers and our project partners. The database was integrated into a GIS and fed into community emergency response plans, which were drafted with our volunteers between 2019 and 2020. Both the database and the community volunteers were utilized during the trade wind simulation that some might remember from June 2019. This was managed by NEMO with the support from the project and its regional and local stakeholders, and it allowed a timely opportunity to integrate the community plans into the national response mechanism and identify gaps. Many of the same community volunteers were targeted for the rigorous first responder CERT training and capacity building workshops on strengthening community-based organizations, always with a focus on disaster risk reduction and supported by the CDB. Our 72 trained volunteers were provided with personal kits and charged with tools and supplies for supporting emergency response in their community. The responsibility for sustaining, monitoring, and supporting these teams are shared by our project partners. Some may remember in April 2017 when we launched the project with an outreach campaign. In 1 week, we engaged over 1,200 persons at all levels of the community. This campaign model was duplicated in April 2018 and again in October that year, adding more tools each year, such as the Island Vibes video-based emergency simulation activity with both community volunteers and students. We did it again in April 2019 to commemorate the 40th anniversary of the eruption. Our most recent outreach campaign launched Beyond the Ashes, a traveling photo exhibition on La Soufrière in November 2019. Though the project is drawing to an end, the effort of the Seismic Research Center will continue in our commitment to reducing risk and enhancing resilience at the community level. We look forward to building on the resources and the foundation that the project has laid. The campaign materials produced supports an exhibition resource design with both print and digital tools. The long-term vision of the project would be a permanent space to facilitate ongoing engagement and development of La Soufrière's geoheritage. In the months leading up to the eruption, the project was also critical in boosting the SRC's monitoring capacity, and relief was also channeled through the project and its partners in response to the eruption. It is an example, this project is an example that effective partnerships and a community-based focus on preparedness with monitoring and response provides a timely opportunity to close the circuit of early warning and effectively save lives, as we have seen in 2021 with the eruption. There's yet to be a more comprehensive and well-timed effort in the region, one that SRC hopes to duplicate in our other volcanic islands and in partnership with the CDB. It goes without saying, we thank all our project partners who made this possible. Without them, none of this would happen. NEMO, the SVG Red Cross Community Development. And last but certainly not least, all our community participants and volunteers that really took ownership of this project and committed their time and efforts. And I continue to see this now that I'm back here, and I really look forward to seeing you all again, working with you all and continuing this work. So thank you very much.
Yes, thank you very much, Ms. Johnson. Again, project manager at the University of the West Indies Seismic Research Center, St. Augustine, Trinidad and Tobago. Next, we'll have a presentation virtually on the overview of the community profiles and livelihood baseline assessments, and this will be done by Mr. Ricardo Aiken, the Community Development Specialist at the CDB, the Caribbean Development Bank, as well as Mr. Roberto Sandoval, Disaster Risk Management Specialist at the FAO.
All right, thank you very much. Can we have the presentation on the screen, please? All right, so the presentation will be joint between Roberto and I. So I'm Richard Aiken, as mentioned, and Roberto Sandoval. And we'll be taking you briefly through the community profile and livelihood baseline assessment process. Next slide. So I'll be looking at 5 main things. We'll look at the background of CDRF in a summary format. Also, speaking about the community profile and livelihood baseline assessment. And then we will do an overview of community profile, then an overview on livelihood baseline assessment and the benefits of that. Next slide. So the Community Disaster Risk Reduction Fund is our multi-donor trust fund. And I'll stick mostly to the purpose. Was aimed at reducing vulnerabilities and building resilience of beneficiary communities. to the impacts of natural hazard and climate change. Why CDRF? Despite increasing regional awareness of the impact of natural hazard and climate change, there has been little recognizable progress in enhancing resilience through tangible risk reduction / climate adaptation interventions at the community level. And this was in 2012. And our objectives, I focus mainly on the last two, which is to build local capacity to plan for and respond to extreme events. And fourth, increase awareness and knowledge of climate change and natural hazard impacts. So the livelihood baseline assessment, a key component within the CDRF is knowledge management. And what we wanted to do was to, during the implementation of the sub-projects, to see what lessons we learn and document those lessons, and how can those lessons be replicated in other spaces. So this is exactly what would have happened in this instance. So we have the Social Development Commission in Jamaica, who has been doing community profiling for decades. So through our involvement with SDC, we adopted their their community profiling approach. And then FAO likewise. This toolkit, the LBA, was developed by FAO and the International Labour Organization. And this has been used quite some time across the region and internationally. So for the community profile and livelihood assessment, the community profile and LBA is a critical achievement for CDRF for objectives. As the data included seeks to inform objective 1, the strengthening of resilience of livelihood. Objective 2, the improvement of local infrastructure and climate change, infrastructure to climate change and disaster risk. Thirdly, opportunities to build local capacity to plan for and respond to extreme events. And fourth and last, strategies for enhanced community awareness of climate change and natural hazards. And what we're doing here mainly is to ensure that our processes are community-centered, that the communities must play a critical role in the design and implementation of decisions that will impact them. So quickly, the community profile uses a participatory approach to give a summary baseline of conditions as well as trends in a community and seeks to establish the context for assessing potential impacts for project decision making, identify community issues and attitudes, locate notable features in the area of study, assess social and economic conditions. And this was borrowed from the SDC. So for their method, it has 4 main components. Component 1 focuses on the spatial data. Section 2, social data, and that will capture some of the demographics, education, housing condition, etc. The governance data, and we know how important the governance is in terms of community development interventions, and that's specific organizations, participation in community groups, and methods of community engagement, just to ensure that our methods of engagement are the ones that are preferred by these communities. And also, importantly, the economic section, which is section 4, and that will capture a bit of employment statistics, occupation and skills, financial services, and land uses. So for that, it is pretty much putting together a synopsis of the space. It's spatial, it's social, it's governance, and it's economic overview. So Roberto, over to you.
Thank you, Richardo. Next slide, please. Okay, so we now proceed with the overview of the livelihoods baseline assessment portion. May I request our colleagues to bring it to the next slide? Next one, sir, ma'am, please. One more click. Okay, so in terms of the livelihood baseline assessment, so the LBA focuses on understanding and documenting the different elements and dimensions that interact with and influence livelihoods. So with this graphic, we can see that the LBA is focused on the different livelihoods assets, or what we also know as livelihoods capitals. So human, natural, social, financial, and physical. And then the LBA examines how these different livelihood assets or capitals are influenced by the vulnerability context in terms of like shocks, the hurricanes that we experience once in a while, the droughts, the pest and disease, the pest and diseases, seasonality, and trends. And then on the other side, we also look at how livelihoods through the different capitals are also influenced by the institutional context, and how all of these things put together then influence the livelihood strategies of communities or households. Because we do know that when livelihoods capitals change or are disrupted, there would be a corresponding change with how livelihoods are being conducted, or hence what we call livelihood strategies. So next, okay. So the main principles or the guiding principles related to LBAs include: number one, putting the community and its most vulnerable members at the center of the analysis, and making sure that their main livelihoods, challenges, and vulnerabilities are understood. Second, helping the communities understand their livelihoods challenges through the lens of the different livelihoods capitals, as already mentioned, including human, natural, financial, physical, and social. Assisting and empowering the communities to identify livelihoods practices or actions that they can carry out to reduce the impacts of and or recover faster from future disasters is the third principle. So by understanding the different transmission channels or modalities of different hazards and risks on the different livelihoods assets of communities and households, and then we would be in a better position to help them understand what they could do to reduce the impacts of hazards and disasters. So next slide, please. So in terms of like the structure, or what are the different elements or sections that we would see on a livelihood baseline assessment, there's no hard and fast rule about this, but typically these are the most common sections or elements. Number one would be general description of the area at risk. Of course, hazard information, demographic information, livelihood profilings, different livelihoods activities, livelihood types, and these things, followed by seasonal impact and response calendars, because we know that hazards and risks, they are seasonal, they are time-based. So it's very important for us to determine, as part of the LBA process, how different hazards can affect different phases or different types of livelihoods across a particular time frame. Next element are what we call response typologies. And then there's also a section or an element that's very important in terms of like identifying the institutions that provide livelihood support. And of course, this is topped up by socioeconomic tables and statistics that allows us to really dig deep into the quantitative information and interpret this alongside the other qualitative information that are gathered or collected as part of the LBA. Next slide, please. Okay. Benefits of the community profile in LBA. So there are 6 benefits. Now first is ease of comparison of the livelihood context, activities, and outcomes for families and communities before and after a disaster. Second, it generates a potential menu of possible responses and actions, like what we call a response typology, that can be planned out, costed, and thought through ahead of time. Third, provides a robust basis for making estimates of the livelihood impacts of disasters. Fourth, helps prepare farming households and increase public awareness about disaster preparedness in the various good practices that can be put in place ahead of time. Fifth, to explore coping and survival strategies that can be strengthened and to discourage those that may be harmful or which would jeopardize agricultural livelihoods. And sixth, to identify and map out the allocation of high-risk and hazard-prone households and communities as they relate to available hydrometeorological and GIS hazard data. So this is essentially the overview of the LBAs, and thank you for the time and attention. Back to you, Richardo.
Yes, so thank you very much, everyone. So we will continue the dialogue, and we're looking forward to expanding, as was mentioned, and replicate this approach in other communities. In fact, our next stops will be in Belize and Jamaica, where we would have already drafted community profiles and livelihood-based assessment for the beneficiary communities within those countries as well. So thank you very much.
All right, thank you very much, Mr. Richardo Aiken, the Community Development Specialist at the CDB, and Mr. Roberto Sandoval, Disaster Risk Management Specialist at the FAO. At this point, ladies and gentlemen, we're about to present to you a video presentation that was put together and compiled on the process, basically, of the livelihood-based baselines assessment. So we'll bring that to you at this moment.
The eruption do a lot of bad thing for us, for me especially. I lose a lot of my animals. I lose my cutlass, because I have my cutlass and me hold them underneath, you see, under decking. I lose a lot. My soil, suppose I planting soil. When I go in my land, nothing. The gingers come over with ash.
It caused a lot of problem in the crops. Most of the crops were damaged because the ash was so strong. When you get between the leaves of the plants, it burn the leaves, and the fruit on the tree, especially bananas and the plantain. When it's ash get between the grains, it scorch the grains and change the color from green to black. So therefore you couldn't harvest them to sell really.
It is a hard place to get out. There is really no safe place when you take to disaster to come out, to get out, and for anything to come in, you know, because it is just a one way. You have the river overflow its bank, and then you have other small streams and things overflow its bank, because when you have this big river come down here, you have that small one there come and meet up with what's coming down here. And then you have the other one along by the church. The rates very, very bad.
Since the eruption, crops as well as animals have to be physically, individuals from the ministry have to physically go out and hand out water. We are in the process of assisting with water tanks for those individuals who need most our assistance. We are looking at giving to our farmers planting materials that are resistant and tolerant to pests and diseases. And that would be for drought as well as for any other disaster which might become the nation.
That was done under BNTF 7 and 8. Yes. There was the construction of the farm road at Lourdes. There, as we know, farmers, like other residents in these areas, would have difficulties in access, whether to access their farmlands, whether to access their homes, especially during heavy rainfalls, or even to access emergency services. But that farm road in Lourdes was basically to help the farmers to access once abandoned farmlands. And that road now helped them not only to, as we know, they used to carry these things like on the donkeys, on the head. Now they can use their vehicles to carry their inputs like fertilizers and chemicals, and also use their vehicles to bring out the produce.
My name is Richard Robertson. I'm from the Seismic Research Center, and we're here in St. Vincent. Seismic has always been here for a long time, and we are fully committed to building resilience on the island. We've been involved in monitoring volcanoes, we've been involved in public education, and more recently we collaborated and got funding from CDB to do the Volcano Ready project. So for the past couple of years we've been involved in the Volcano Ready project, which is a key element in our thrust towards ensuring that there is resilience built at the community level, which is key here in St. Vincent, to the volcanic hazards and the hazards associated with volcanic islands. We will be here for a long time. We will continue to work with NEMO and with the government of St. Vincent to ensure that people in St. Vincent are aware of the hazardous environment that they have to deal with, and help them to find ways in which they can live safely and resiliently in the environment of St. Vincent and Grenadines.
CDB is devoted to the continued collaboration with our borrowing member countries as we jointly navigate development obstacles. Our commitment to building resilience within St. Vincent and the Grenadines was evidenced by our supporting activities prior to and since the most recent eruption of the La Soufrière volcano. Through the Community Disaster Risk Reduction Fund, the Volcano Ready Communities Project sought to reduce vulnerability to the multi-hazard environment for 11 communities within the red zone. Since the eruption, CDB is providing assistance in grants and loan financing to the government to assist in the response and early recovery phases, as well as participating in the detailed damage assessment process led by the government of St. Vincent and the Grenadines, and the post-disaster needs assessment being coordinated by the United Nations Development Programme. All our interventions are guided by our mission of reducing poverty and transforming lives through sustainable and inclusive development, while ensuring no one is left behind as we seek to
revolutionize the agriculture sector through innovation, climate-smart practices, and value chain development approaches for increased food security and sustainable livelihoods.
Build social resilience anchored on equity, non-discrimination, and advocacy for gender equality.
Utilize effective community engagement approaches to ensure beneficiary communities are included in decisions that affect them.
As the disaster risks that we are facing in the Caribbean become more complex, intense, and systemic, it is now more important than ever to have a much better understanding of how different disasters have affected and could continue to affect livelihoods. This requires a structured yet practical approach that will involve communities and the different institutions important for their development. FAO is glad to be part of the Community Profile and Livelihood Baseline Assessments, which have been created for 11 communities in St. Vincent and the Grenadines. We would like to express our gratitude to our partners for the opportunity to be part of this important undertaking, and remain committed to helping our agricultural communities to boost and enhance their resilience to future disaster events.
And of course, this, as I think I mentioned earlier on, this assessments process would have taken place in 11 different communities here in St. Vincent and the Grenadines. And of course, it's always well and good to hear firsthand on the impact and the effect that this process would have had. So at this point, we're going to hear from, the words of Ms. Tamara Thomas, a community representative of the community of South Rivers. Had some difficulty in getting here physically this morning, so her testimonial is going to be presented this morning by Mr. Sinclair Yearwood.
Protocol have already been established. Good morning, all. Let me take this opportunity on behalf of participants of the 11 beneficiary communities to say a special thank you to all the funders, coordinating and implementing agencies for providing us the opportunity to be community-based researchers of St. Vincent and the Grenadines community profiles and livelihood-based assessments. The process was inclusive and engaging. This platform enabled both males and females from youth, middle-aged, and elderly to identify, discuss, and agree on issues which affect them. As a single mother, farmer, seamstress, and part-time vendor from a rural community, the research helped me to identify the hazards my community are exposed to, along with the potential impacts of both short and long-term on my livelihood. Therefore, understanding my vulnerability, I was motivated even more to develop additional skills to sustain my family. From a community standpoint, the findings can bring substantial benefits to us. Namely, as community residents, we can pull ourselves together into existing or new groups to develop and or advocate for community resilience building programs and projects to benefit our community diversities. Also, having pre-disaster data on communities readily available to response agencies and planners. If disaster strikes, community livelihood can quickly recover through targeted approaches. In conclusion, I endorse this study to be implemented in other communities across St. Vincent and the Grenadines over time. Thanks again to the stakeholders in the process for formally handing back the findings to us at the community level. Thank you very much.
Yes, and thank you, Mr. Yearwood. Again, he was expressing the words of Ms. Tamara Thomas, a community representative of South Rivers, one of the communities that the livelihood baseline assessment would have been executed in. At this point, we'd like to invite to the podium the Senior Assistant Secretary in the Ministry of National Mobilization, Social Development, Family, Gender Affairs, Youth Cooperatives, Community Development, Housing, and Informal Human Settlements to present her address to you. Present to you Mrs. Lafleur Kwame Harry.
Thank you, Chair, for that elevation. A very pleasant good morning to our viewers on the various online media outlets and those persons who are present here physically. We have Mrs. Nerissa Gittins Macmillan, the Permanent Secretary in the Ministry of Agriculture, Ms. Michelle Forbes, the Director of NEMO. We have the famous Dr. Richie Robertson and Ms. Monique Johnson from the UE Seismic Research Center. It is my distinct honor to be here representing the Honorable Orlando Brewster, Minister of National Mobilization, Social Development, which also has the responsibility for community development here in St. Vincent and the Grenadines, at this community profiles and livelihood-based assessment launch, and to recognize the timeliness of this event as our beloved country is in the midst of several challenges. We have the ongoing recovery efforts from the explosive volcanic eruption of the La Soufrière volcano that began on April 9th, 2021 this year. We are currently in the 2021 Atlantic hurricane season, and of course we have casting over us the ongoing COVID-19 pandemic. The information contained within these reports were gathered from 11 communities from both the leeward and windward sides of the island. We did in Fancy, Oria, Sandy Bay, Overland Magum, Connery, Park Hill, South Rivers, Spring Village, Rose Hall, Chateaubelair, and Fitzhugh. And this assessment was conducted over a period of 2 days by a combined group of staff from the Ministry of National Mobilization and NEMO with the use of the COBO toolbox. The purpose and use of these completed documents will be vitally important in this country's recovery plans in general, and for the Ministry of National Mobilization specifically, in that these documents provide a roadmap in several vital areas. Firstly, in the area of community development, the importance of community profiling cannot be overstated, as by doing these profiles, a complete as possible picture of the communities emerges. Having this clear picture would go a very long way to allow for targeted interventions, both in terms of disaster recovery or just general interventions. In terms of disaster recovery, by providing a clear picture of what an affected community was like pre-disaster, relief agencies such as the Ministry of National Mobilization, NEMO, and even our international partners can provide targeted assistance and can also know the cost of such interventions. These documents could also reduce the length of time before any disaster response, recovery, and relief can commence. The use of these documents will not solely be for disaster recovery, but will also serve to guide other interventions in terms of community needs. The point must be stressed that community members were very intimately involved in the community profiling process. Therefore, any needs identified in these documents were derived directly from the engagement of the community members. However, the profiling process does not end here, but rather will continue in various communities throughout the length and breadth of St. Vincent Grenadines towards influencing the holistic development of this country. The community profiles, while being of utmost importance, are only a part of the picture. The other aspects of these documents is the livelihood baseline assessment. Much like with the profiles, the purpose of the LBAs is to provide a baseline snapshot of livelihood and economic activity that occurs within the community that can allow for targeted interventions in the most effective and efficient manner. Again, much like the community profiling process, the LBA process will continue to be applied to various communities throughout our Blessed Isles. In closing, I would like to express the direct gratitude on behalf of the Ministry and the Government of St. Vincent and the Grenadines by extension to all parties involved in the collection, compilation, and production of these documents: the Social Development Commission of Jamaica, the Caribbean Development Bank, the Food and Agricultural Organization, the University of the West Indies, NEMO, the Ministry of Agriculture, and of course, all community residents who gave of their time to provide the needed information. I reaffirm our ministry's commitment and assurances that these current documents and others to be produced will not just be piled on a shelf, but will be used for the benefit of the communities and the overall development of St. Vincent and the Grenadines. Thank you.
Yes, thank you very much, Mrs. Kwame Harry. At this point, we'll now hear from the Permanent Secretary in the Ministry of Agriculture, Forestry, Fisheries, Rural Transformation, Industry and Labour, Mrs. Nerissa Gittins McMillan.
Good morning again, all. This time this speech is the minister's, not mine. St. Vincent and the Grenadines is recovering from a series of threats within recent times. There is COVID-19 pandemic, a dengue fever outbreak, and beginning April 9th, the eruptions of La Soufrière. This has placed a tremendous amount of financial strain on the management of the country. The tourism sector has been decimated, thus placing agriculture at the forefront of the recovery efforts. The ministry has adopted a multi-pronged approach with the theme of building back better to remodel wealth creation through goods and services as a way of focusing on the recovery of the sector, which has been severely impacted, while harnessing the best standards and process to achieve its objectives. We recognize that the continued decline in agriculture will significantly impact the economic and social viability of rural communities, and if left unchecked, will likely result in further deterioration of real incomes and an increase in poverty rates in rural communities. Getting a younger, more diverse cohort of farmers becomes critical. The public's expectation of the ministry are many. With limited resources, this demands strategic planning and execution of policies for maximum impact. The ministry has been building resilience in the sector by assisting farmers with water harvesting and conservation for crops and animals. Thus far, several water tanks have been given to both plant and the livestock farmers. This would assist not just for the current disasters, but also for drought and other cyclonic impediments. We still expect more to be handed out soon. The data has shown that there would be more frequent and stronger systems in the region. We cannot continue to hope because we are home of the blessed, that God is of ascension and nothing will happen to us. We just have to be more robust in our preparations. Similarly, we are giving out plant materials that are more resistant and tolerant to pests and diseases. Though the Biodiversity Center at Orange Hill has been severely damaged as a result of the volcanic eruptions, we are nevertheless able to assist through the use of the Dumbarton and Wallaloo stations, as well as assistance from regional organizations such as IECA and FAO. There is currently an active and ongoing program of improving and increasing farm mechanization, introducing innovation and digitization through the use of tractor service. Soon, we will be utilizing the Cobra Toolbox online data platform. This will speed up the process with fewer resources. The idea is to be able to give in real-time data information utilizing available technology. This would allow for scientific policy formulation which augurs well for national development. One of the things that has become obvious is the fact that less land space is available to agriculture. The ministry is therefore encouraging greenhouse farming with all of its attendant benefits. We are embarking on rigorous research and development. We are looking at means of knowledge transfer in a bid to get more for less, reducing our food import bill, which has tremendous benefits of encouraging healthy diets, especially in rural communities. Healthier diets allow for a more active population, reduction in our healthcare bill, and increased productivity. Our diversification unit is, as we speak, working on a comprehensive strategy to make use of new and emerging opportunities within the sector. This we would shortly take to our stakeholders for further discussions and refinement. The ministry is giving special emphasis to the fisheries and the blue economy. We are cognizant of the fact that we have more water than land space available, but that the sort of investment and technologies necessary to harness the tremendous benefits therein may be beyond most of whom are likely to participate. Thus, the government has decided to step in and offer some assistance to fisheries in the form of boat engines at reduced interest rates, boat repairs, and such like. We go back to the days of when agriculture focused on one particular crop at a time. And thus it has impacted on our thinking. For too many years, agriculture has been sold or marketed as a fallback on activity for those who are not so academically inclined. This mindset needs to be changed to encourage those very bright students to bring their expertise to the sector. This will need to be done by encouraging agriculture in some form from primary schools upward. Agriculture is a key source of employment in the country, but specifically in rural communities. If we are to use the information captured in the LBAs, we would notice that a wide cross-section of individuals were involved in the process. And thus, here is a start for us to utilize the information to build back better, to bring resilience while we take local rural communities along with us. Ladies and gentlemen, this, we believe, is one of those ways that we can impact local development for all of us. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, P.S. Gittins McMillan. Of course, she was speaking on behalf of the Minister of Agriculture, the Honorable Saboto Caesar. Of course, at the very end of this process, the idea is to have these assessments in hard copy and available for persons, general public and other entities to be able to have them and peruse them as they will. But at this particular moment, what we are going to do is have the unveiling of the cover of the book that these assessments will be placed into. So with that being said, we'd like to invite P.S. Gittins McMillan as well as Mrs. Kwame Harry from the respective ministries as well as Ms. Tamara Thomas, who is now here with us, the representative from the community of South Rivers, as we'll have this unveiling take place just off to my physical left here. Again, we'd like to say thank you to the persons who are in the various hubs. The hub at the Ministry of Agriculture's conference room. Leaders from the various community groups are there. We also have persons who would have had to have been evacuated from Fancy, Owia, and Sandy Bay. They are being housed at the moment at the Caliacqua Anglican School and the Dorsetshire Hill Evangelical Church. Again, we say good morning to those of you as well viewing via VC3 and also listening to our live production process here on NBC Radio. So again, Mrs. Lafer Kwame Harry, Senior Assistant Secretary in the Ministry of National Mobilization, along with the Permanent Secretary in the Ministry of Agriculture, Mrs. Nerissa Gittins McMillan, and also joining them there is Ms. Tamara Thomas of the community of South Rivers. Getting ready now to unveil the community profiles and LBA's book cover. So this is, of course, is what the cover of the document will look like. You're getting a first-hand glimpse of it. As we said at the end of this entire process, this will be the cover of the entire community profile and livelihood baseline assessment that will be made available to persons in the general public, different ministries, different entities, of course the communities that took part as well. So I'm pretty sure that there are persons out there who, especially the residents of these 11 communities, who are probably anxiously waiting for the final completion of these documents so they can see how best we can go forward in building back our communities and improving livelihoods across the region, across the state, but in particularly these communities. And as we are pretty much at the end of our proceedings here this morning, at this point I'd like to invite the local government officer in the Ministry of Urban Development, Energy, Airports, Seaports, Grenadines Affairs and Local Government, Mr. Roger Young, to come to the podium to deliver the vote of thanks for this process this morning. Mr. Young.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Protocol already established, but I would like to recognize the presence of Dr. Richard Robinson and Ms. Michelle Fobbs, Director of NEMO. It is my honor to bring the vote of thanks. I want to first of all thank the chairperson, Mr. Cato, Pastor Wade Carter for the opening prayer, the Elite Steel Orchestra for the national anthem, P.S. Macmillan, the Minister of Agriculture, for the opening remarks, Dr. Renata Clark of the Food and Agriculture Organization of the United Nations for her remarks, Ms. Deirdre Clarendon of the CDB for her remarks, Ms. Monique Johnson of the Seismic Research Center, UE, for giving an overview of the Volcano Ready SVG project, Mr. Ricardo Aiken and Mr. Roberto Sandoval of the CDB for an overview of the community profile and livelihood baseline assessment. I would also like to thank Mr. Sinclair Yearwood for bringing remarks on behalf of Ms. Tamara Thomas, the community representative of South Rivers. I would also like to thank Ms. Lafleur Kwame Harry, Acting SAS, Ministry of National Mobilization, for her remarks on behalf of Honorable Dr. Orlando Brewster, Minister of National Mobilization, etc. And I would also like to thank Mrs. Macmillan, PS Minister of Agriculture, for her remarks on behalf of the Honorable Suboto Caesar, Minister of Agriculture. I would also like to thank the persons who are involved in the unveiling of the community profile and LBA book cover on behalf of Honorable Suboto Caesar and Dr. Brewster. That's in the form of P.S. Macmillan and Ms. Kwame Harry and the community representative, Ms. Thomas. I also want to recognize the hard work of Ms. Rhonda Sutherland and staff of the communication unit of the Ministry of Agriculture, who was ably supported by staff members of the Ministry of National Mobilization for actually planning and coordinating this launching ceremony. I also want to thank the media, including VC3 and NBC Radio, for covering this activity. I also want to thank the management of Beachcombers Hotel for allowing us to use their conference facility. As it was mentioned in the various remarks, addresses, and overviews, the process that led up to this launch took a few years. So it will therefore be remiss of me not to recognize the various key contributions made along the way. As such, I want to also take the opportunity to thank the contributors without whose input we would not have reached at this stage to have a launching ceremony. The Community Disaster Risk Reduction Fund, CDRRF, administered by the Caribbean Development Bank and financed by Global Affairs Canada and the European Union. We appreciate the effort and commitment that went into this process and the goal of the fund to build community climate resilience as it is manifested here today. To the other partners, the Food and Agriculture Organization of the United Nations and the SDC of Jamaica, Social Development Commission, we are grateful for the knowledge shared with community development professionals and practitioners in St. Vincent and the Grenadines. I want to also recognize the contribution of Ms. Claudia James and Mr. Yearwood of the CDRRF and the BNTF CDB, respectively, and Mr. Ricardo Aiken, Community Development Specialist, CDB, for their worthwhile contributions and vision. The process that led to this point of the launching of the profiles and LBAs for St. Vincent and the Grenadines started back in December 2017 at a regional workshop held in St. Vincent and the Grenadines, sponsored by the BNTF and CDB, and coordinated by Mr. Aiken, entitled Effective Community Engagement and Integrated Community Development. From the start, we knew that the process was certain to be more than a talk shop, as the activities of the workshop always included practical training and field visits, as we met people where they were most comfortable. That is, by the bar, on the street block, at the community meetings, at the beach, in their lands, in their homes, and at church services. There was no place too far and no one unworthy of being included in this process. The 2017 workshop exposed us to participatory action research techniques and the latter planning activities for the development of the community profiles and LBAs, which were held both in St. Vincent and the Grenadines and in Belize in 2019, were facilitated by the STC Jamaica and Mr. Aiken. I want to therefore thank Dr. Vernon, Executive Director of the SDC, and his hard-working staff for the invaluable contributions. And I want to mention a few of those staff: Ms. Reed, Ms. Anderson, Ms. Francis, and Ms. Walker. During the process, we were not just professionals working towards a common goal, but we became a family. We spent long hours during the day gathering data, and at nights, we continued working, we cooked, and we ate together. The entire exercise was not solely about completing the documents, but more importantly, the process was about ensuring that in the end, development professionals in St. Vincent and the Grenadines had the skills and capacity to do it on their own. Dozens of field workers are now trained in the field, and we are all equipped to replicate the process in other communities as we seek to build climate resilience across St. Vincent and the Grenadines. The BVI is one of the 4 participating countries in the Community Profile and LBA initiatives. I want to take this time to thank the participants from the BVI for their assistance on the ground in developing the profiles and LBAs for St. Vincent and the Grenadines. I want to also say thank you to Mr. Banner and his team from the Ministry of Labour, Local Government and Rural Development, Belize, for hosting training workshops and coordinating community outreach sessions on developing community profiles and LBAs. I want to also thank consultants Dr. Campbell and Dr. Potts for their instruction in using the FAO ILO Livelihood Assessment Toolkit. I want to also thank the heads, leaders, owners, and chairpersons of community and conference centers, schools, shops and bars within the various communities for allowing us to use our facilities for outreach activities. I want to also thank the various caterers in the communities, the minibus drivers and owners, and the media who cover the field activities. I want to also say thanks to the members of the local CBOs and other groups, community leaders, and the residents who participated in various exercises and also assisted with data collection. I want to also thank P.S. Macmillan, who had all the pressure on our shoulders. And also, I'd like to thank the members of the staff of the various divisions within the Ministry of National Mobilization, namely Community Development, Cooperatives, Gender Development, Social Protection, Youth Development, Child Development, for their contribution. I want to name some persons. I hope I don't miss out anybody. Kwesi, Karen, Sinclair, Dolores, Jen, Bausha, Portia, Ijaz, Glaston, Desmarie, Dwight, and I also have to mention Joel. I also want to thank Dunstan Johnson and Orita Peters and Jorin Lelo for kicking off the data collection process in Fancy. And I'm going to use a cricket analogy. They opened the batting. So I want to thank them a lot. I also want to thank the local BNTF office for their support. I also want to thank the Ministry of Agriculture, specifically Ms. Deborah Daniel and staff of the planning unit. I also want to thank Ms. Siobhan Alexander from the statistical unit for assisting us very early in the process. I also want to thank the GIS unit, physical planning unit, Ministry of Transport Works, Lands, etc., for providing the maps that we use in the profiles. I want to also thank the staff of NEMO for their support, and also the seismic unit of the UWI. And I must make a confession here. Without the Volcano Ready project, I don't think the Ministry of National Mobilization would have been able to make an initial contact with the CDRRF. So I want to thank the Volcano Ready project for that assistance there. I also want to thank the Honorable Saboto Caesar and the Honorable Augusta Stevenson. They were present at all the workshops that we had in St. Vincent, that is from 2017 right up to the last one in 2019. I want to thank them for their contributions and support. In closing, I hope other national, regional, and international development partners can adopt similar approaches to what was used in the LBA process to garner greater community involvement and participation. These documents should now be used to write project proposal to secure funding for climate resilience building interventions. The lack of data is a serious challenge, and this is a great step for these 11 communities. Community leaders now need to host discussions around the available data and plan strategies to better secure local livelihoods. Again, thank you to all for participating in this event and in the entire process, and I'm certain that the CDB, the FAO, and the SDC are looking forward to an ongoing partnership to facilitate learning, sharing, and resilience building at the community level. I thank you.
All right, thank you very much, Mr. Young. And again, we say thanks to you who have taken time out to be viewing this process here on VC3, and to those who have been listening as well on NBC Radio. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen, those who have been viewing, the persons here in house, and we wish you all a very pleasant day.